In this video, we move our focus off of the days leading up to the return of Christ to the earth and look specifically to the time and events associated with the second coming of Christ. For people who do not follow Christ, his return to earth will be like a thief coming in the night. No man knows the day or the hour of the return of Christ to the earth. This fifth thing is important because Jesus told us in the Gospel of Matthew, "But concerning that day and hour no one knows, not even the angels of heaven, nor the Son, but the Father only. For as were the days of Noah, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. For as in those days before the flood they were eating and drinking, marrying and given in marriage, until the day when Noah entered the ark. And they were unaware until the flood came and swept them all away. So will be the coming of the Son of Man." In fact, he said that the day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night. In verse 42 through 44, he said, "Therefore stay awake, for you do not know what day your Lord is coming. But know this, that if the master of the house had known in what part of the night the thief was coming, he would have stayed awake and would not have allowed his house to be broken into. Therefore, you also must be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour you do not expect." In other words, those that do not study the Bible to learn the signs of his second coming will experience the return of Christ like someone who has had their house broken into while they were sleeping. The thief comes suddenly and leaves them bewildered, shocked, injured, and afraid because they did not expect their house would be robbed. It will not be a good experience for those who are caught unprepared. The sixth thing you need to know is that when Jesus returns to the earth, he will come as a warrior king, exacting God's vengeance and judgment upon all who do not love his coming, and will set up his kingdom in Jerusalem. From there he will judge every man and woman that is still alive or who has ever lived on the earth. Unlike his first appearance on earth 2,000 years ago, Jesus will not come as the sacrificial Lamb of God, slayed for the sins of the world. But he will rush back as a roaring lion of the tribe of Judah. Upon his return, his initial primary purpose will be to wage war on the devil. Yes, there is an actual super being that is evil and powerful and at war with God and his creation and his followers. After defeating his enemies, he will set up the courts for judgment. The initial phase of judgment will begin with all the dead being raised and the separation of those who know and love him from those that don't. Jesus warns us in Matthew 25, verse 31, "When the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, then he will sit on his glorious throne. Before him will be gathered all the nations, and he will separate people, one from another, as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And he will place the sheep on his right, but the goats on his left." In Revelation 20, we read that there will be a final reckoning where each person stands before and gives an account to God. The Bible likens this event as standing before the judgment seat of Christ. Again, the Apostle John tells us in the book of Revelation that, verse 11, "Then I saw a great white throne and him who was seated on it. From his presence earth and sky fled away, and no place was found for them. And I saw the dead, great and small, standing before the throne, and books were opened. Then another book was opened, which is the book of life. And the dead were judged by what was written in the books, according to what they had done." Verse 13 says, "And the sea gave up the dead who were in it. Death and Hades gave up the dead who were in them, and they were judged, each one of them, according to what they had done. Then death and Hades were thrown into the lake of fire. This is the second death, the lake of fire. And if anyone's name was not found written in the book of life, he was thrown in the lake of fire." The author of the New Testament book of Hebrews tells us in chapter 9, verse 7, that it is appointed to man to die and then judgment. The Apostle Paul warns us in 2 Corinthians 5:10, "For we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, so that each one may receive what is due for what he has done, in his body, whether good or evil. He also tells us in Romans 8:18, "For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men, who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. For what can be known about God is plain to them, because God has shown it to them. For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world in the things that have been made. So they are without excuse." We can clearly see from the above verses that no man or woman will avoid the judgment of God, and that some, actually most, will even experience the wrath of God at that final judgment. This part is the part that is most disconcerting. The notion that I will someday stand before the all-knowing, holy, just, and righteous God and have the actions, words, and thoughts of my entire life exposed, scrutinized, and judged by the perfect creator of the universe is frankly terrifying. Up to this point, the news has been really bad. Frankly, the picture painted thus far is bleak, dismal, and on the surface, hopeless. However, we have just turned a corner. We have just crossed the bad news peak. The long, excruciating uphill march of the current condition of the world and the hearts of women and men, and the headlong plunge into tribulation and judgment has ended. The information we will be discussing on the downhill side of this journey is easier, more hopeful, better. We are about to go from all bad news to finally good news. The information we are about to cover is known as the gospel. That word literally means good news. Considering everything we have talked about thus far, this next piece of information is really, really good news. Over the next couple of videos, we will discuss this good news.